The storm did not arrive politely. It did not send a gentle gray warning across the Wiltshire sky. No distant rumble to allow time for shutters to close or fires to be stoked. No, this storm fell upon Blackwood Manor like a sentence already passed, tearing through the ancient elms, scattering leaves across the courtyard like accusations no one could gather back. And Eleanor Beaumont was not inside, safe behind glass and candlelight. She was on her knees in the mud. Her sapphire gown, the finest she owned, the one she had saved for evenings that mattered, now clung to her like a second, sodden skin, the delicate embroidery at the hem dragging through cold, filthy water. Her auburn hair, so carefully pinned by Sarah only hours before, hung in dark, dripping ropes against her pale cheeks. She did not sob. She did not beg. Shock had stolen her breath first. Grief had not yet caught up. From the shelter of the stone archway, lit by the warm, merciless glow of the manor's lanterns, stood Lady Beatrice Langford, her stepmother. Dressed in deep burgundy silk, pearls gleaming at her throat, as though she had merely stepped out to bid farewell to guests after a pleasant dinner, not to cast a young woman into the night. "You have shamed this house," Beatrice said, her voice low, calm, carrying the quiet authority of someone who had rehearsed cruelty until it felt like kindness. "You have shamed your father. A disgraced woman has no place here." The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples spread outward, already reaching the servants clustered in the doorway, already destined for drawing rooms across the county. Baron Thomas Beaumont stood half in shadow behind his wife, silent. His face, once capable of laughter, now carved with something between grief and resignation. He did not speak. He did not reach for his daughter. That silence, Eleanor would later understand, was its own verdict. The heavy oak door closed. Not slammed. Closed with a precise, final click, the sound of a coffin lid settling. Rain swallowed everything. Eleanor pressed her palms into the wet gravel, forcing herself to breathe. In and out, slow, deliberate. In Victorian England, in the year 1884, a woman's reputation was not merely pride. It was her future, her marriage prospects, her claim to anything at all. Without it, she was already a ghost, still breathing, but erased. And Beatrice had just used that truth like a blade. Then, through the storm, came the slow, rhythmic clatter of hooves on the stone road beyond the gates. Closer. Stopping. Eleanor did not look up. She had no reason to expect mercy. The iron gates creaked open. Polished boots struck the courtyard stones, steady, unhurried. They stopped 2 paces from where she knelt. A long pause. Then, a gloved hand entered her blurred vision. Open. Extended. Black leather. Calm as a barrister's promise. She lifted her eyes. The man standing over her was tall, lean. Dressed in a dark greatcoat, white shirt open at the collar where rain had pulled at it. His dark hair clung damp to his forehead. His jaw was set. His gray eyes, deep, unreadable, held hers with something that was not pity, not curiosity, but recognition. As though he had seen injustice written on a face before, and knew its shape by heart. He did not speak. He simply waited, hand steady. Behind him, a black carriage stood at the gate, brass lanterns burning gold against the blue-black night, horses restless but held. Eleanor stared at that open hand for 3 full heartbeats. Then, with what remained of her dignity, which turned out to be more than she had believed, she reached up and took it. If this opening already has your heart racing, feeling that raw injustice Eleanor endured, then imagine how many women throughout history and even today have been silenced, shamed, and cast out with no hand extended in the storm. Stories like hers deserve to be heard, shared, and remembered. So if you felt even a flicker of anger or hope for Eleanor in those first moments, please don't scroll past. Hit that like button to show her story matters. Drop a quick comment with where you're watching from and subscribe right now so you never miss the moment her truth finally breaks free. It takes just seconds, but it keeps voices like hers from being drowned out again. Thank you, truly. Now, let's continue. The accusations had begun quietly, like poison slipped into tea. Lady Beatrice Langford had discovered the pearl brooch missing from her dressing table, only to find it later tucked beneath a folded shawl in Eleanor's room. She had held it up at supper the evening before, palm open, expression perfectly balanced between sorrow and reluctance. "I am sure there is some explanation, Thomas, but the servants have spoken of late-night conversations, of Mr. Julian Carver calling more often than propriety allows. I felt you ought to know the full picture." The full picture Beatrice painted was meticulous. A theft. Clandestine meetings. A young woman risking everything for improper affection. Whispers spread through the servants' hall first, then outward, carried on the lips of housemaids to the village, from the village to the drawing-rooms of Wiltshire. By the time the Hargreaves' autumn gathering approached, the story had hardened into fact. Baron Thomas Beaumont listened. He asked his daughter one question across the dinner table, voice flat. "Is any of it true?" Not, "Tell me it is false." Not, "I trust you." Simply, "Is it true?" Eleanor met his eyes and said nothing. Silence had become her only defense. The next evening at Blackwood Manor, the household staff were assembled in the entrance hall. Eleanor's small trunk sat waiting, hastily packed, improperly packed. Sarah Wilkins, the loyal maid, stood near the back, eyes downcast, unable to meet her gaze. Lady Beatrice arrived home from the gathering first. She stepped into the hall, burgundy gown untouched by rain, and spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had already won. "You have shamed this house. You have shamed your father. A disgraced woman has no place under my roof." The oak door opened onto the storm. Eleanor was guided, gently but firmly, outside. The rain met her like judgment. She stumbled once on the wet steps, then sank to her knees in the courtyard mud. Her sapphire gown soaked through in seconds, heavy fabric clinging, embroidery ruined. Thunder rolled overhead, low, unforgiving. Baron Thomas appeared at the threshold behind his wife. He looked at his daughter once, long, then turned away. The door closed with that same precise click. Eleanor pressed her palms into the gravel. "Breathe. Now, slow." In 1884, a woman without reputation was nothing. No marriage. No claim. No future. Beatrice had known exactly how to use that truth. Then, hooves. Steady. Approaching through the downpour. Stopping at the gates. The iron creaked open. Boots on stone, polished, deliberate. They halted 2 paces away. A pause. Long enough for lightning to flash across the sky. A gloved hand appeared in her line of sight. Black leather. Open. Steady. Eleanor lifted her head. The man was tall, lean, dark greatcoat streaming rain. White shirt open at the throat where the storm had tugged. Dark hair plastered to his brow. Gray eyes, deep, unreadable, fixed on hers with something closer to recognition than pity. He said nothing. He simply waited. Behind him, a black carriage waited, brass lanterns spilling warm gold into the night, horses shifting restless. Eleanor stared at the hand for 3 heartbeats. Then, with what dignity she could still summon, she reached up and took it. His grip was firm, sure. He helped her to her feet without haste. Rain streamed down both their faces. The carriage door opened. He guided her inside, out of the storm, into quiet, shadowed warmth. The door closed behind her. The carriage rolled away from Blackwood Manor, wheels cutting through mud and rain, carrying Eleanor deeper into the night. Inside, the world narrowed to the soft creak of leather, the faint scent of wet wool, and the steady rhythm of Edmund Harrington's breathing across from her. He had not spoken since she took his hand. He simply watched the storm lash the windows, jaw tight, gray eyes distant yet alert. They traveled perhaps half an hour before the carriage slowed, turned onto a narrower lane, stopped before a low stone lodge half hidden among dripping oaks. No grand estate, no servants waiting with lanterns. Just quiet, seclusion, safety. Edmund stepped down first, offered his hand again. Eleanor took it, her fingers cold, trembling, and followed him inside. A fire already burned low in the grate. Someone had prepared the place discreetly. He closed the door against the wind. The sudden silence was almost deafening. He removed his soaked greatcoat, hung it near the hearth, gestured to a worn armchair. Sit. Warm yourself. There is tea, brandy if you prefer. You are safe here. Eleanor sank into the chair, the heat of the fire reaching her like mercy. Her gown dripped steadily onto the rug. She stared at the flames, trying to find words.
I did not steal the brooch. I have never met Mr. Carver alone after dark. None of it is true.
But the whispers have already traveled. By morning, the county will believe I am ruined. Her voice cracked on the last word. She swallowed, forced herself to meet his gaze. Edmund pulled a second chair closer, sat without ceremony. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on knees, listening with the kind of stillness that made silence feel safe. Tell me everything. From the beginning. So she did. The missing brooch, Beatrice's careful discovery, the twisted letter from Julian, the servant's reluctant gossip, her father's silence at the table. She spoke of the will, the inheritance she stood to claim upon marriage, how Beatrice's daughter Clara would gain more without it. She spoke quietly, without tears, but the weight of every word pressed against her ribs. Edmund listened. When she finished, he remained still for a long moment. Then he exhaled, slow, measured. I have seen this before. Not in Wiltshire, but in London drawing rooms, courtrooms, quiet country houses. A woman's name destroyed because it stood between someone and what they wanted. It is not justice. It is convenience. He rose, crossed to a small writing desk, returned with paper, ink, a candle. I will help you. Discreetly. No scandal attached to my name, none to yours. But we will find the truth, and we will make it impossible to ignore. Eleanor watched him light the candle, steady hands despite the storm still raging outside. Something in his quiet certainty steadied her own breathing. Meanwhile, back at Blackwood Manor, Lady Beatrice moved with practiced grace. She wrote brief notes to 3 neighboring ladies, each worded with exquisite reluctance. Poor Eleanor, such a disappointment. One hates to repeat what the servants say, but for the sake of the family. By dawn, the rumors would have new wings. Eleanor accepted the pen Edmund offered. Her hand shook only slightly as she began to write to Mr. Julian Carver.
Dear Julian, I need your help. Not as a suitor, but as a friend who believes me. They have taken everything but the truth. Will you stand with me to reclaim it?
She sealed the letter, handed it to Edmund. He nodded once. In 1880s England, a woman's reputation was her only true currency. It could buy marriage, security, a voice in the world. Lose it, and the doors closed forever. Beatrice understood this better than most. She had spent years learning how fragile that currency was, how easily it could be devalued. But she had not counted on one thing. Some hands, when extended in the dark, do not let go. Edmund placed her letter in his coat pocket. Outside, the rain began to ease. Rest now. Tomorrow, we begin. Eleanor leaned back, eyes on the fire. For the first time since the door had closed behind her, she allowed herself to hope. Dawn came slowly to the hunting lodge, gray light filtering through rain-streaked windows. The storm reduced to a steady drip from the eaves. Eleanor had barely slept. She sat by the fire in a borrowed woolen wrapper, hair still damp, staring at the letter she had written to Julian the night before. Edmund had sent it at first light, by a trusted writer who asked no questions. A soft knock sounded at the back door. Edmund rose without a word, crossed the room, opened it just enough. A man stepped inside, slender, middle-aged, spectacles fogged from the damp air. Mr. Reginald Thorne, solicitor, old friend of Julian Carver's from their university days. He carried a small leather satchel, rain-darkened at the edges. Edmund closed the door behind him. Thorne removed his hat, nodded once to Eleanor. Miss Beaumont, this is Mr. Thorne. He has come to help. Thorne set the satchel on the table, opened it carefully. He withdrew a folded sheet, yellowed, ink slightly smudged. Mr. Carver received your letter an hour ago. He is already moving in London, but he asked me to come at once. I have spoken with Sarah Wilkins. Eleanor straightened. Sarah, faithful Sarah, who had stood silent in the hall the night she was cast out. Thorne continued, voice low. Sarah came to me before sunrise, terrified, but determined. She saw Lady Beatrice place the pearl brooch herself, in the alcove outside her own dressing room, the very evening it was discovered in your chamber. Beatrice looked at her. One long look, the kind that promises ruin if silence is broken. But Sarah remembered, and when I asked, she told me everything. Eleanor exhaled, a small sound, almost a sob held back.
Sarah risked her place for me. She could lose everything.
Thorne nodded gravely. She knows. But she said, Miss Eleanor never raised her voice to me, never looked down on me. I cannot let this stand. Edmund leaned against the mantel, arms crossed, listening. Thorne produced another item, a single letter. Julian's handwriting, the one Beatrice had shown to select neighbors. This was taken from your writing desk, shown to 3 ladies of standing, certain phrases circled, stripped of context. My thoughts are with you always become something quite different when read alone. But the full letter is proper, respectful, a courtship begun in earnest. Eleanor reached for it, fingers tracing the familiar loops.
Julian never spoke improperly. We walked in the garden once. Twice. Always in sight of the house. Beatrice must have watched. Waited. Twisted it all.
She looked up, eyes narrowing as pieces began to fit.
It is not just the brooch. Or the letter. My father's will. The one written before Beatrice came. Promised me a portion upon marriage. Or his death. Enough to live independently. Enough to lessen what Clara would receive. Beatrice has spent 4 years making Blackwood Manor hers. She would not let me walk away with any part of it.
Thorne's expression darkened. Precisely. I have made discreet inquiries. The family solicitor, Mr. Aldridge, prepared a codicil last spring, one that redirects your share to Clara. The Baron was ill that week, confined to his room. He never met Aldridge to sign it. The signature, I suspect, is not his. Silence settled, heavy as the rain outside. Edmund straightened. We have the beginning of proof. Sarah's testimony, the letter in full, questions about the codicil. But we need more, and we must move carefully. Beatrice is not careless. Far away, at Blackwood Manor, Lady Beatrice stood at her dressing table. A footman had just reported an unfamiliar rider leaving the estate gates at dawn. Her fingers tightened on a lace handkerchief. She did not know who had come, or why. But she felt the first faint tremor of something shifting beneath her feet. She turned to the mirror, smoothed her expression. Whispers could be controlled. But whispers that found ears willing to listen. Those were dangerous. Back at the lodge, Eleanor folded Julian's letter carefully, placed it beside Thorne's documents.
Then we gather more. Every fragment. Every witness. Until the truth is too loud to silence.
The fire crackled. Outside, the rain began again, soft, persistent, like the first threads of a gathering storm. The days at the hunting lodge slipped into a quiet rhythm, measured, deliberate, like the turning of pages in a book no one else was allowed to read. Eleanor rose early, helped Edmund keep the small hearth burning, accepted the plain meals a discreet housekeeper left at the back door. She no longer wore the ruined sapphire gown. Instead, a simple gray dress borrowed from the lodge's modest wardrobe. It fit poorly, but it was dry, and that was enough. Across the county, the whispers Beatrice had planted continued their slow poison. Lady Victoria Langley, wife of the local magistrate, a woman of sharp eyes and sharper conscience, received one of Beatrice's carefully worded notes over morning tea. The letter spoke of regrettable lapses, poor judgment, a father's sorrow. Victoria read it twice, then set it aside. Something in the phrasing rang false, too perfectly reluctant, too eager to wound without appearing to do so. She had known Eleanor since the girl was a child, quiet, kind, never careless. She folded the letter, tucked it into her desk, and sent a discreet messenger to Mr. Reginald Thorne. Thorne arrived at her home that afternoon, satchel in hand, voice low in the drawing room. He shared Sarah's testimony, the full context of Julian's letter, the questions surrounding the codicil. Victoria listened without interruption. When he finished, she nodded once. I never believed the tales. Beatrice has always played her cards too close. I will watch, and when the moment comes, I will speak. Meanwhile, in the drawing rooms of Wiltshire, Mr. Julian Carver moved with quiet courage. He called on neighbors, accepted invitations to tea, and when Eleanor's name arose, always in hushed tones, he met the insinuations head-on. Miss Beaumont is innocent of these accusations. I have known her character for years. Any suggestion otherwise is baseless and cruel. He risked his budding career as a barrister, his reputation in the county, but he spoke plainly, firmly. Word of his defense spread, not as gossip, but as counterweight. A few heads began to turn, a few doubts to form. At the lodge, Edmund Harrington turned his own influence to quieter channels. As Duke of Ravenscroft, he had access few others did. He wrote letters under seal, dispatched writers to London, inquired discreetly into Mr. Aldridge, the solicitor who had prepared the suspicious codicil. Replies came swiftly, guarded, but telling. Aldridge had been absent from his office the day the document was supposedly signed. The Baron had been bedridden with fever. No witness could place them together. Edmund shared these fragments with Eleanor each evening, by the fire, maps and papers spread across the low table between them. They bent over documents together, heads close, voices low. She traced lines of text with a steady finger, questioned inconsistencies, offered insights he had not considered. He listened, truly listened, gray eyes warming when she spoke. One night, the fire low, rain pattering softly against the roof, Eleanor looked up from a letter.
You do not have to do this, Edmund. You could walk away. Leave the scandal behind. A duke need not involve himself in a baronet's daughter's troubles.
He met her gaze, unflinching. I could. But I have spent too many years watching injustice dressed as propriety. And you, Eleanor, you fight with clarity most people lose in anger. I find I cannot look away. A small silence followed. Not uncomfortable, but charged. She felt the shift, the way his voice softened on her name, the way his hand lingered near hers on the table, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth.
Then we continue. Together.
He nodded, the faintest curve at the corner of his mouth. A spark, small, but undeniable, kindled in the quiet between them. Outside, the county stirred. Beatrice felt the first faint tremor of resistance. A note from Lady Victoria arrived, polite, neutral, requesting a private word. Julian's name appeared in conversations without scorn. And somewhere, unseen, a duke's quiet inquiries tightened like a noose she had not yet noticed. The web Beatrice had spun so carefully began, very slowly, to fray. The hunting lodge felt smaller each day, walls pressing in with every new revelation. Eleanor spent mornings at the small table. Papers spread like a map of a battlefield she had not chosen. Edmund came and went, quiet meetings in nearby villages, letters carried by writers who knew better than to speak. Mr. Reginald Thorne returned one gray afternoon, coat damp from mist, satchel heavier than before. He placed a single document before her, the codicil itself, copied in haste from Aldridge's office files. Look here, the signature line. Compare it to the Baron's known hand on the original will, the one from 5 years ago. The loops on the D and Thomas, the pressure of the pen, they do not match. Aldridge admits now, privately, that the Baron was not present when this was executed. He was told the Baron had already approved the terms, but the ink tells another story. Eleanor traced the forged signature with her fingertip, slow, disbelieving.
So it was never valid. My portion, the one my mother insured, remains mine. Upon marriage, or upon father's death. Beatrice knew, and she tried to steal it before anyone could claim it.
Thorne nodded, voice grave. Exactly. The original will stand. We have enough now to challenge, but we must be ready for what comes next. What came next arrived swiftly at Blackwood Manor. Lady Beatrice felt the air shift, subtle, but unmistakable. A servant hesitated too long when she asked after Sarah's whereabouts. A footman looked away when she passed. She summoned Clara to her sitting room, the girl's golden curls trembling as she entered. You will say nothing to anyone. Do you understand? Not a word about what you may have overheard, what you may have seen. Your future depends on it, and so does mine. Clara nodded, small, frightened. Beatrice turned next to the staff. Quiet threats, veiled promises of dismissal, reminders of how easily positions could vanish. The household grew quieter, eyes downcast, mouths shut. Eleanor could wait no longer. She asked Edmund to arrange a private meeting, away from the manor's watchful windows. He chose the old summer house at the edge of Blackwood's gardens, half hidden by overgrown roses. She arrived at dusk, wrapped in a dark cloak, heart pounding. Baron Thomas waited alone, seated on a weathered bench, hands clasped between his knees. He looked older than she remembered, lines deeper around his eyes. Eleanor, I did not know the full measure of it. Beatrice said, the evidence was clear. I believed, because it was easier than questioning. His voice cracked. He did not meet her eyes.
You asked only if it was true, never if I was innocent. You let her close the door behind me. In the rain, without a word.
Silence stretched between them, heavy, unbroken. I was grieving your mother still, even after all these years. Beatrice offered order, calm. I took it, and I failed you. Eleanor felt the ache rise, sharp, familiar.
I do not ask for forgiveness tonight. Only that you see what she has done. What she continues to do. The codicil is forged. The brooch was planted. The rumors twisted. Will you stand with me when the time comes?
He looked at her then, truly looked. Conflict swam in his gaze, love tangled with shame. I need time, but I will not stand against you again. He rose, slow, and walked away into the gathering dark. No embrace, no promise, only the faint hope of something mending, far off. Eleanor returned to the lodge alone, cloak sodden from evening mist. Edmund waited by the fire, reading her face the moment she entered.
He is conflicted, distant. I do not know if he will choose truth over comfort. She sank into the armchair, exhaustion settling deep. Sometimes I wonder if truth can ever prevail against all this machinery. The whispers, the threats, the weight of what people already believe. What if we gather every proof, and still the world refuses to see?
Edmund knelt beside her chair, close enough that she felt the warmth of him. It has before, and it will again, because you refuse to stop. We are not alone in this. She looked at him, gray eyes steady, and for a moment, the doubt eased. But outside, the shadows lengthened. Beatrice's web tightened. And the machinery of Victorian society, quiet, relentless, continued its slow turn. The hunting lodge had become a quiet war room. Candle stubs burned low each night, wax pooling on the table like forgotten tears. Eleanor and Edmund sat shoulder to shoulder, papers fanned out between them, ink stains on their fingers, voices hushed even though no one could hear. Sarah Wilkins arrived one evening under cover of early dusk, hood drawn low, eyes wide with nerves. Mr. Reginald Thorne had escorted her, ensuring no one followed from Blackwood Manor. She stood just inside the door, hands clasped tight, until Eleanor rose and crossed to her.
Sarah, you did not have to come. You have already risked so much. Sarah shook her head, voice small but steady.
I have to finish what I started, miss. I saw her place the brooch, clear as day. I cannot carry that silence any more. Thorne produced a sheet of foolscap, already prepared. Sarah took the pen with trembling fingers, signed her name beneath the sworn statement. Her words, simple, precise, were now on record. Date, time, the alcove outside Lady Beatrice's dressing room, the deliberate placement, the warning glance that had kept her quiet until now. She handed it back, shoulders straighter than when she had entered. It feels lighter, already? Thorne folded the document carefully, sealed it. He left soon after, promising to deliver copies to trusted hands. Later that week, a discreet note arrived from Lady Victoria Langley. She had kept Beatrice's letters, reread them in the privacy of her own study. The inconsistencies leaped out now. Dates that did not align, phrases repeated almost word for word across multiple recipients, a careful choreography of regret that rang rehearsed. Victoria wrote to Thorne, "I am prepared to testify to the pattern, should it come to that. The truth has a shape, and this does not fit it." Edmund read the note aloud by firelight, voice low and measured. Eleanor listened, chin resting on her hand, watching the way his brow furrowed when he concentrated. They worked late, comparing Sarah's statement to the codicil, tracing the timeline of Beatrice's rumors, noting every small contradiction. Their conversations had grown longer, deeper. She challenged his assumptions, he admired her precision, and in the quiet spaces between words, something unspoken took root. One midnight, rain drumming steadily on the roof, Edmund set down a quill, looked at her across the scattered papers. "You see details others miss. Not just facts, but intent. It is remarkable." Eleanor felt warmth rise in her cheeks, unexpected, unwelcome in its timing.
And you listen. Truly listen. Most men would interrupt. Correct. Dismiss. You do not.
He held her gaze a moment longer than necessary. The fire popped, sending sparks upward. Neither moved closer, but the air between them felt thinner, warmer. Meanwhile, at Blackwood Manor, Lady Beatrice paced her sitting room. A housemaid had hesitated when asked about Sarah's whereabouts. A neighbor had mentioned Julian Carver's continued defense of Eleanor's name. Lady Victoria had sent no reply to her latest invitation. The threads Beatrice had woven so carefully were beginning to pull loose, one by one. She stopped before the long mirror, smoothed the lines of her face. She could not allow doubt to spread. She needed to remind the county who held the reins, who defined normalcy. The plan formed quickly. A grand autumn reception, the kind Blackwood Manor had hosted for years. Invitations would go out at once, elegant cards edged in gold, promising music, fine wine, the illusion of an unbroken household. Baron Thomas would stand beside her, smile, greet guests. Clara would wear her prettiest gown, play the charming daughter. And Eleanor's name, if mentioned at all, would be dismissed with a sad shake of the head, a murmured, "Such a pity." Beatrice sat at her writing desk, pen moving swiftly. She would display control, unity, prosperity. No cracks would show. No one would dare question her in her own home. Back at the lodge, Eleanor folded the last document of the night, rubbed her eyes. Edmund watched her, quiet concern in his expression.
She will not stop. She will fight to keep the mask in place.
Then we will be there when it slips. The reception, if she holds it, could be the moment everything unravels. Eleanor nodded slowly. Outside, the rain fell harder, gathering force. The storm was not over. It was only shifting, building, ready to break where no one expected. Blackwood Manor glowed against the autumn dusk. Windows ablaze with candlelight, music drifting from the open doors like a promise of unbroken harmony. Carriages lined the drive, guests in silk and velvet stepping down to be greeted by Lady Beatrice Langford, smiling, composed, pearls gleaming at her throat. Baron Thomas stood beside her, face fixed in polite welcome, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Clara hovered nearby, golden curls perfect, hands clasped to hide their tremble. The illusion held, for now. Inside the drawing room, laughter rose and fell, glasses clinked, The scent of beeswax and spiced wine filled the air. No one spoke of Eleanor. Not yet. Then the doors opened again. Lady Victoria Langley entered first, tall, regal, arm linked with Julian Carver's. Behind them, Eleanor Beaumont stepped into the light. She wore a simple midnight blue gown, borrowed from Victoria's wardrobe, hair swept up plainly, no jewels, no pretense. Her face was pale but steady. A hush rippled through the room, glasses pausing halfway to lips, eyes widening, then narrowing. Beatrice turned slowly, smile frozen for one heartbeat before it returned, thinner. Miss Beaumont, how unexpected. I was not aware you were invited.
I was not. But truth does not require an invitation.
Julian stepped forward, voice calm but carrying. We come not to disrupt, but to clarify. Mr. Reginald Thorne moved through the crowd next, leather folder in hand, spectacles catching the candlelight. He stopped near the fireplace, opened the folder with deliberate care. Ladies and gentlemen, I have documents, sworn statements, that concern matters spoken of in this county for too long. First, Sarah Wilkins. Sarah entered from the side door, apron replaced by a neat gray dress, chin high despite the tremor in her hands. She spoke clearly, voice carrying to every corner. I saw Lady Beatrice place the pearl brooch in the alcove outside her dressing room, the evening it was later found in Miss Eleanor's chamber. I saw it with my own eyes. A murmur rose, quickly stifled. Thorne continued, producing the codicil. The original will, letters side by side. The codicil redirecting Miss Beaumont's inheritance is forged. The Baron was not present to sign it. The signature does not match his hand. And these letters, shown to several here, were presented without context, deliberately misleading. Beatrice's face remained composed, but her knuckles whitened on the stem of her glass. Eleanor stepped forward then, into the center of the room. She looked at no one in particular, yet every eye found her.
I did not steal. I did not conduct myself improperly. I was accused because I stood in the way of greed. A portion of this estate was mine, by my mother's wish, secured in the original will. Someone wished it gone, so they wove a story to erase me. I say this not to wound, but because the truth was never allowed into this room before. It belongs here now.
The silence that followed was absolute. Beatrice set her glass down, too carefully. Her composure cracked, not with a shout, but with the smallest tremor in her lower lip. Across the room, Edmund Harrington stood near the doorway, gray eyes fixed on the Baron. He had arrived earlier, unannounced, and drawn Thomas aside to a quiet antechamber. There, in low tones, he laid out the evidence. The forgery, the planted brooch, the threats to servants, the pattern of manipulation. She used your grief, Thomas. She used your trust. Your daughter never betrayed you. But your wife betrayed you both. Baron Thomas listened, face draining of color. When Edmund finished, Thomas said nothing at first. Then, quietly, I see it now. All of it. He returned to the drawing room just as Eleanor finished speaking. He looked at his daughter, really looked, shame and sorrow mingling in his gaze. He did not speak yet, but he moved to stand nearer to her, a small, silent shift. The witnesses closed in. Lady Victoria stepped beside Thorne, a voice clear. The letters I received, they do not align. Dates wrong, stories repeated word for word. It is not accident. It is design. Julian added his voice, steady. And I will swear, in any court, that my correspondence with Miss Beaumont was honorable. Beatrice looked from face to face, the circle tightening. Her smile had vanished. Her hands trembled now, openly. The room held its breath. The music in the next room had stopped. Only the crackle of the fire, and the soft rustle of silk as guests shifted, uncertain, waiting. The trap had closed. And Beatrice stood at its center. No escape left but truth. The drawing room at Blackwood Manor held its breath, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and unspoken accusations. Lady Beatrice Langford stood at the center of the circle. pearls still perfect at her throat, burgundy gown immaculate, but the mask had slipped. Her lips parted once, twice, as if to speak, to deny, to redirect. No words came. The forged codicil lay open on the table before Mr. Thorne, the mismatched signature glaring under candlelight. Sarah's sworn statement rested beside it, plain ink on plain paper, but heavier than any velvet curtain. Julian Carver's full letter, untwisted, unmanipulated, spoke for itself. Lady Victoria Langley's quiet testimony sealed the pattern. There was nothing left to twist. Beatrice's knees buckled first. She reached for the nearest chair, missed, then found it, sinking into the cushioned seat as though the room itself had withdrawn its support. Her hands trembled in her lap, no longer steady enough to hide. The guests watched, some in shock, some in quiet satisfaction, none moving to help. Baron Thomas stepped forward then, slow, deliberate. His face carried the weight of every silence he had allowed, every comfort he had chosen over truth. He stopped before his wife, voice low, but carrying to every corner. "Beatrice, is there anything left to say? Any explanation that can undo what these papers show, what these people have witnessed?" She lifted her eyes to his, searching for the softness she had once relied on. It was gone. "Thomas, I only wanted security. For Clara. For us. You wanted more than that. You wanted everything, and you were willing to destroy my daughter to have it." Beatrice looked away, toward the fire, toward the guests who now averted their eyes. No ally stepped forward. No voice rose in her defense. The room had turned. Thomas straightened, addressed the assembly. "The original will stand. My daughter's portion is restored, as it was always meant to be. The codicil is void." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd, not triumph, but release. The machinery of reputation, once turned against Eleanor, now ground in the opposite direction. Beatrice rose unsteadily. Clara at her side, the girl's face pale, eyes wide with confusion and sorrow. No dramatic exit. No final barb. Only quiet retreat. They left through the side door, a footman already summoned to prepare the carriage. Beatrice would go to her sister's home in Cheltenham, Clara with her. The manor would be quieter without them, but the silence would be honest. Later that night, when the guests had departed, the candles burned low. Eleanor found her father in the library. He sat at the old desk, the original will spread before him, fingers tracing the lines his first wife had insisted upon years ago. He looked up as she entered, no words at first. Then, softly, "Eleanor, I cannot erase what I allowed to happen. I let grief blind me, let comfort deafen me. I failed you, in the worst way a father can." Eleanor crossed the room, stood before him. Hurt still lingered, sharp beneath the surface, but she did not let it rule her voice.
"I know, and I will not pretend it disappears tonight. But I also know you loved my mother. And you loved me once, before the shadows came. We cannot go back. But we can go forward. Slowly. Honestly."
He reached out, tentative, placed his hand over hers on the desk. No embrace yet, but the beginning of one. Healing would take time, but the first step had been taken. The next morning, the air crisp with autumn, Eleanor walked the garden paths alone. Edmund found her near the stone fountain, leaves drifting gold around them. He fell into step beside her, hands clasped behind his back, silent at first. "The storm has passed, for now."
Has it? The rain stopped. The accusations are answered. But the echoes remain. He stopped, turned to face her fully. The grey eyes that had once been so guarded now held something warmer. Unguarded.
"Eleanor, I came here that night on a flooded detour, intending nothing more than shelter from the rain. I found more than that. I found a woman who fights with clarity, who sees truth where others see convenience, who stands when everything urges her to fall." He paused, breath visible in the cool air. "I have spent years managing estates, disputes, appearances. I thought I managed my own heart just as carefully. But these weeks, watching you, working beside you, have shown me something I cannot ignore. My feelings for you, they are no longer a possibility. They are a certainty." Eleanor's breath caught, the world narrowing to the space between them.
"Edmund."
He took a small step closer, not touching, but near enough that she felt the warmth of him. "I do not ask for an answer now. Only that you know, when the dust settles, when the last shadow lifts, I wish to stand beside you, not as ally, but as something more, if you will allow it." She looked up at him, gray eyes steady, heart racing beneath the calm she had fought so hard to keep.
I need time too. But I do not wish you to stand anywhere else."
A small smile touched his lips, brief, genuine. They walked on together, side by side, the path ahead uncertain, but no longer lonely. Behind them, Blackwood Manor stood quiet, the reckoning complete. Ruin had come, but so had renewal. The weeks that followed the reception moved with the quiet efficiency of justice finally given room to breathe. Legal matters unfolded in solicitors' offices and county registries, swift, precise, unyielding. The forged codicil was struck from record. The original will, written in clearer days by a man still grieving his first wife, stood restored. Eleanor's portion was hers again, secured upon marriage or her father's passing, enough for independence, enough for choice. Lady Beatrice Langford's position at Blackwood Manor became untenable without a single dramatic scene. She departed quietly for Cheltenham, Clara at her side, the household staff exhaling in collective relief as the carriage wheels faded down the drive. Eleanor returned to Blackwood not as a disgraced daughter, but as herself. She walked the halls she had once known so well, touching the banister, pausing at windows, reclaiming the space one breath at a time. Her dignity had never truly left her that stormy night. It had only waited, patient, for the world to see it again. Baron Thomas moved through the days with careful steps, learning how to speak without apology in every sentence, how to listen without defensiveness. They shared meals in the smaller dining room, conversations short at first, then longer. Hurt lingered, a quiet ache beneath the surface, but healing had begun in the simple act of trying. Clara's letter arrived 2 days after their departure. Small handwriting on plain paper, genuine. "I did not understand, until it was too late. I'm sorry, truly. I hope one day you can believe that." Eleanor folded it carefully, placed it in the drawer beside her mother's old locket. She wrote back the same evening, kind, measured, because forgiveness did not need to be grand, only honest. Autumn deepened. The elms along the drive turned gold, leaves drifting like slow confetti across the lawns. Eleanor walked the garden paths most afternoons, alone at first, then with Edmund Harrington beside her. They spoke of small things, books, the weather, the way light fell through the branches. They spoke of larger things too, justice, resilience, the shape of a life reclaimed. One clear afternoon, the air crisp with wood smoke, Edmund found her by the stone fountain. Sunlight caught in the water, turning droplets to gold. He stopped a pace away, hands clasped behind his back, the Duke's composure softened by something unguarded in his eyes. "Eleanor, when this is truly over, when the last shadow has lifted, I find I cannot imagine." He paused, voice dropping lower, almost reverent. "I cannot imagine a future that does not include you. Not as ally, not as friend alone, but as the woman whose clarity steadies me, whose courage reminds me what strength truly looks like. Every quiet evening, every storm that may come, I want you beside me." Eleanor's heart rose sharp in her chest, breath catching on the edge of a word. The garden seemed to still, leaves hanging suspended, the fountain's trickle the only sound.
"Edmund."
She stepped closer, close enough to see the faint tremor in his jaw, the warmth behind the gray eyes that had once been so unreadable.
"I do not ask for promises today. Only that you know. My heart has decided. And it decided long before I found the words."
Their fingers brushed, once, tentative, then held. The touch carried the memory of that first hand extended in the rain, steady, sure. Eleanor looked up at him, the world narrowing to the space between them, to the unspoken question hanging in the golden light.
Then perhaps, when the time is right, we will find the rest of that sentence together.
Then perhaps, when the time is right, we will find the rest of that sentence together.